Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second night of our three-evening series with Reimar Heider. I will take the time to reintroduce Reimar, as there may be people here who were not here last night. Reimar is a physician by training. He is a human rights activist, translator, and editor. For 20 years, he was one of the spokespersons of the international initiative Freedom for Öcalan, Peace in Kurdistan, and one of the main organizers of the Network for an Alternative Quest. He has translated several of Öcalan's books into German and is one of the founding members of the Academy of Social Science. And last night, the title of the talk was A Series of Concepts, Surprising Twists, Öcalan and the Kurdish Freedom Movement. And tonight's talk is Building Blocks. So we're focusing on democratic confederalism, Jineolojî, and the Queen of Sciences. And the series in general, the entire series was called The Building Blocks of a New Life. So please join me in welcoming Reimar for a second.
Introducing me again. Hi everybody. In case you wonder who the Queen or what the Queen of Science is, we're going to get to that. Yesterday we talked about a couple of concepts that have been discussed in the Kurdish Freedom Movement and have mostly been introduced by Öcalan, building on other authors, writers that he found interesting and whose concepts he has taken up and modified or turned around a bit or criticized or radicalized. So I would like to continue a little bit more of that, to give some more examples of that before we then get to more constructive approaches like what to build with this or how to build around this. I'm going to start with another story. I think these mythological stories were. Another of these mythological stories, I looked the story up again today from different sources, and it was quite striking what I found and what I did not found. Yesterday I said that some of these stories were later, these myths, not stories, but that these myths were later modified and underwent changes before they reappear in Hebrew tradition and then in the Bible or elsewhere, or how the characters of gods were modified over time, like we know that maybe the Greek and the Roman gods better than the ancient Babylonian, Assyrian, or even older the Sumerian gods. So I mentioned Enki, the crafty god, as he was called by this professor from Chicago, Samuel Noah Kramer. And I mentioned Inanna, who I said is not really the mother goddess, it's just a very prominent feminine goddess. The actual, what's more like a mother goddess is called Ninhusak, which means something like, again, the sources differ, it's like the queen of the mountainous regions, which is a bit of a positive description, and others were she's the queen of the wasteland, of the unfertile rocks or something like that. So we already get this thing. So the myth, which is well documented in two different versions from different times and on different tablets with slightly different names of the mentioned persons, goes like this. It's the second part of a longer story, and the story goes like this: that Enki is the like the husband of Ninusak, and together they have a daughter. And the next thing that's happened is that Enki sleeps with the daughter, and they, because he wants a son and he didn't get a son from his wife, so he sleeps with the daughter. She gives birth to another daughter, like her daughter. Then he sleeps with her. She gives birth to yet another daughter. And then, well, he wants to sleep with her as well. And his wife, Ninusak, tries to like stop him. She counsels, she gives advice to her, what's it now, where are we now, granddaughter?
Great.
Yeah. How to like escape him, like how to avoid him. And then what he does is he disguises himself as a beautiful gardener. He's like this tricky god who can do these kind of things. And sleeps with her in the shape of this gardener. And now Ninusak intervenes full force and takes the semen out of her womb.
Out of her great-granddaughters.
Yes, not her, the one he just slept with. And throws it on the ground in her garden, and from that 7 plants grow. So she owns the garden, and then there are 7 plants. What Enki does is he eats them, I don't remember for what reason exactly, and gets terribly sick because they were not good for him. And Ninusak is not too unhappy about that he's getting sick, but it's like almost deadly. And then the council of the higher gods, let's say like the Olympic gods in Greece, or the higher level of the god, they convince her to not let him die, but to help him. So what he does is he heals him, and the method is like she pulls something out of different organs of him. I don't know exactly, like the head, the arm, or something. One of them is really the rib, like literally. By extracting something there, she creates new entities, like creations, like, I don't know, some spirits, things. And then he gets well again. So with this story, I mean, one thing is that it's pretty frightening that this is one of the oldest mythological stories that we have in written form, like what is happening there. I mean, we know the stories of the Greek father of the gods, that he sleeps with every woman that he sees, like goddess and human alike. But this is, I think, a bit more drastic even. And we have a lot of these motifs, like I mentioned yesterday, that we then find in the creation myth in the Genesis. You have this, we have a garden, only it's not the male god's garden, but it's the queen of the god's garden. It belongs to her. She is the one actually creating something from bodily parts or from the rib, not him. So we see this in this later version, a lot of things are turned on its head. And also, first of all, she's creating, not the male god is creating, but she is. So this is, I mean, the story itself is quite drastic, but on top of it, if we look at it, comparing the later versions with it, we see that there must have been some social change in the society, when at the beginning, like, she is creating and she's healing and she owns the garden and everything, and the guy is like doing terrible stuff and intruding and stealing stuff from the garden, or you know, these plants. While later we have everything the other way around. We have a god that owns everything. He's the one who creates, first of all, not a woman anymore, which would be the more natural way of looking at things, that she creates human beings and not some male figure. And he owns the garden, and he makes the rules, like what can you eat and what can you not eat. And he punishes afterwards when somebody eats something wrong. So we have a lot of things that happen in between. It's like, I don't know the exact timing, but it's like, and we don't really know how old this later biblical, this Genesis story is. We only know when it's written down, which is much later. But between the written versions is easily like 3,000 years. So the myth preserves, always preserves, but of course changed and modified. We don't know what other people in the region made from this and how it was told. But I mean, the point is, I don't want to go too much into this myth. Only that want to make the point that we can look at these things not as fantasy stories, but as hints on social history. You can use this to read them in a way that you can make interpretations about actual societal conflicts. Reminded me a bit when I thought of this question yesterday about psychology. I don't know, I've decades ago I've read this Total and Taboo by Freud, which makes a lot about the ban on incest as being constitutive for society. I think when we look at this, we can also think in these categories a bit, like what really, who makes the rules, who can do what, and what is then really positive for society. I may come back to this. The other aspect of the story, and this is now coming to a kind of more current concept that Öcalan introduced just very recently. It's in this yet unpublished manuscript that I was talking about. It's on the actual change I mentioned yesterday. How did we actually get from a non-patriarchal society, from, can say, matriarchal society? I know there's different interpretations of this term, what this actually means, but one that is led and guided by women. So how did this change actually occur? We have no real, apart from these myths, we have no real written analysis documents about this, so we have to interpret a little bit. And since this question is very central for Öcalan, saying okay, Marx and Engels have interpreted history as a serious succession of class struggles and sorted it a bit in this way. And he says, yeah, but classes are facts, so it's also important to have this in mind. But the more fundamental and much more structuring for human society is the hierarchy between the sexes, like patriarchy. It is not only older, it is also more fundamental in the sense that because it's older, it paves the way for all other hierarchies. Like if you live in a community of equals, you can't even, it's even unthinkable to enslave somebody. It's just outside of what you're thinking. You live in harmony with the people around you, at least not in that kind of hierarchy. So to make this even thinkable, hierarchy had to first be introduced into human society, and the first hierarchy was patriarchy. So this is why it's not only older, but it's also very fundamental because it's like the origin of all the other hierarchies. So this exact question, like what happened there actually and why did it happen, is then, given what I said yesterday about examining things from the origin, very important for Öcalan, and he goes into this again and again in several books and develops successive concepts. The first one, or the first metaphor with which he described that, was an alliance to turn this womanly order on its head, an alliance by the strong man, which means like groups of armed people, like maybe hunters that gather together and form their own culture, different from the rest of society or from the women's culture, and then after some point behaved in a more organized way. So there's the strong man on one hand. On the other hand, you have the wise man, the wise older man maybe, who is like with his experience, he's able to influence the younger persons and let them do things for him. Can be like a community leader, like a mayor, or tribal leader, or something more ancient in this sense. So he has kind of a political power, and you have the figure of he calls it shaman, but it doesn't mean like exactly like the shamans of whatever, Central Asia or something else, just like a figure that communicates that they can become priests or something. It's just can look very different in different societies, but the person who has a connection to forces beyond what we can see. So he either sees things, or he brings messages, or he has different powers of healing. Can be several things. So his first approximation was to say, okay, this must have been like an alliance of them. They banded together, and they became like the cornerstone of later of the state, which is still the continuation I was talking about. Is still, or we can still find it in different times until today, these three groups. Like you have to run a state, you have like a political force, people that are able to bring their projects to the people or make them do something, like this old man or the wise man. Then you have the ideologues of the system, that's either through theories or through whatever use of media today or through use of religion, can influence the way that people think beyond like concrete political projects. And of course you have the armed forces, and you have constituting, I think, like Engels at some point I think made a very simple definition saying like status, I don't know exactly anymore, but something like a group of armed men with, I don't know, something else. Anybody?
Special bodies of armed men?
Yeah, but like as a definition of the status, special bodies of armed men plus some things then constitute for the state.
Monopoly on violence? Monopoly on violence? Was that?
Yeah, that's the effect of it. Nobody has the exact 14 months. It really matter. So, but the point is, all these things we can see throughout history, we can find like literally everywhere. And so the point is to connect this to these origins. So what does he think these groups, like when they allied, like first in the person of, or in the form of several groups or several men or several groups of men, which serve several functions. At times, or then later, when we get to these god kings, it's like in Egypt, the pharaohs. Yeah, everybody has heard of the pharaoh. But in the Sumerian city-states, it was very similar. There were these godlike kings, so they were declared gods, and they were like spiritual rulers, but they also had the control over the armed force and everything. So they were pretty much similar to the pharaohs. So then all these functions can fall into one person, like being priest kings. I mean, they were coming from this group of priests. So the question then is like, okay, how? Not only how, but like why? Why does this happen at all? Or what is actually happening? Like, if these groups like take power, what exactly are they doing? Like, how are they? I mean, what does it mean that they suddenly become in charge? So by taking this principle that development comes out of contradictions, like Öcalan then says, okay, like against what was this developed? So what is the opposite of that? So what were they organizing against, to say, forward in lines? And well, from again, we don't have exact documents. We can maybe today observe how matriarchal societies work, but there are almost none that are completely untouched by the world around them. So they would have already, developed in relationship with civilized societies or with very hierarchical societies. So there's no form that would maybe totally resemble those 10,000 years ago or so. So he's looking at how, according to anthropological literature and other things, how women-led society works, or what is the core, what's the important aspects of that. And that is not, it's not, we hear this sometimes as a criticism, and I've had this discussion a lot, that people say, yeah, he's talking so much about the nature, so he naturalizes everything, or he essentializes, because women can have children, so then they have certain specialties, properties, this is absolutely, I think this is absolutely not what he's doing. He's hinting to all kinds of possibilities, and I think the Kurdish Freedom Movement is the last one that limits women to a certain definition and say, you have to do this and those things you cannot do. On the contrary, it's all about making everything possible, opening all the doors so that women can understand themselves, can organize themselves, can develop a free will and take whichever role they like in society. So it's not about women getting, giving birth to the children, but it's socially organizing around that. So keeping society together, building communities, mentioning Freud, putting really the rules who can do what, and providing equality, nurturing from the babies from day one, but also the community. So that is egalitarian or equalizing kind of organizing society, which, if this is the dominant mindset, if everybody thinks this way, all these later developments cannot happen. So you can't have god kings, you can't build pyramids. Why would anybody build a pyramid if he's not forced? They are forced to do it. It would be very difficult to plays a role to convince them that this is someone necessary for the gods or something. It's also important to convince, not everything can be done with force, because then people will defend themselves against that. So we looked at all this anthropological literature, explaining how probably these small groups, I don't know what they are in English, hordes or clans or something, yeah. How they moved, how they spread over the earth, basically, coming from Africa and then going to all the continents, long before the sanitary lifestyle, long before agriculture, everything hundreds of thousands of years earlier, but telling all the story from a perspective of the Middle East. It also always emphasizes the important role of the Middle East and Kurdistan, basically the geography, as a hub for that. Yes, they were coming from Africa, but this, the Middle East was one of the first population centers where, through good climatic conditions at the time, there was a lot of things to eat and animals to hunt and whatever. So there was a growth in population, and from there, if you look at the geography, continents don't exactly look like today, but it's really the only way from Africa to go anywhere else is through the Middle East. So from there to Asia, Europe, Australia, the Americas. Then the movement was there, and he I'm not sure where exactly, if this is exactly proven or not, but he assumes that the so-called symbolic language, which is not talking in symbols, it just means that you use sounds for something else. Like let's say this is a notebook, so the sounds notebook don't have anything to do with this thing. Whereas I make the noise that a wolf makes to imitate a wolf to signify, to talk about the wolf, then it's more like imitating something. So this kind of symbolic language was like probably developed in that time during the Middle East, like after our ancestors moved out of Africa, and possibly from there, so that also like the languages really, like the humans spread from there. And like in later, like he, in several points, emphasized really the central centrality of the region. We can continue. Then agriculture was developed there and spread all over the world. Then the state was developed there, spread all over the world. If you take Egypt together with that, then the monotheistic religions all come from there, like Judaism being the core of that, and like Islam being actually much closer to Judaism than to Christianity, like theologically. So it's like one stem that comes from there, just trees from that. And only pretty recently, if you look in those time spans, only pretty recently has moved completely elsewhere. Like at the center of civilization was Europe for a while, and is now. Actually, I could have maybe tomorrow. I could have had a slide on that. There's a made a nice drawing of that. So he sees, just as he sees the state as one, as I mentioned yesterday, he also sees civilization as one. Like it's one big thing that developed there with two roots in Mesopotamia, the first city states in Sumer, and in Egypt, which was then almost at the same time the next, from which then all the other, for a couple of thousands of years, the other civilizations sprang. He talks, another concept that I want to mention here is that of the central civilization. He says, yes, there's of course like one civilization which has all the hallmarks, has hierarchies, has classes, is ruled from cities, is based on patriarchy anyway, and has these kind of similarities. Also appears in other parts of the world, like China, especially China, like relatively early, but if you compare it, like pretty late actually. So he says it's either influenced, like logic-wise, or directly that people maybe moved there and introduced some things. In any case, while there are other civilizations as well, or other places of civilization as well, there's this concept of a central civilization. It's borrowed from a guy, professor named Wilkinson, I forgot his first name, saying that, and he modifies it again, of course, a little bit, saying this is like one river, one stream of civilization, like starting, like having the source of the river, like in Egypt and Sumer, and then goes through the Assyrian Empire, Babylon, the Hittite Empire, coming to Greece, and after Alexander the Great, the Hellenistic period with the central civilization being more in the east than in Greece itself, then moving to Rome as the center. Then after the end of the Roman Empire, actually moves back again to the Middle East, because the Islamic civilization in different regions is actually the most culturally developed of the time, compared to the European Middle Ages. Then in fairly recent modern times moves again to Europe, like with the Italian city-states, and slowly we're getting into these capitalist times, with capitalism coming first in the Netherlands and in England. So the center for a while is there, then has recently moved across the Atlantic to the east coast of the US. Then further west, like even more recently, to the west coast of the US, kind of where we are, like technologically, culturally, like being leading. And he speculates may move further west, like we may see in the 21st century, that it actually moves to China. Now, China is a special case, maybe the biggest civilization outside of this line. And the argument is to say, yes, it may be big, there may have been many people. At times it has had like China, like 1/3 of the world's like production of goods and everything. However, it's more self-contained and has much less influenced the rest of the world than this central civilization, which from day one has tried to expand, conquer, colonize, missionize, like bring the own ideas to every part of the world, which China hasn't done, the Chinese civilization hasn't done in the same way. It has ruled maybe over a big territory, but not in the same, and not the same tendency to expand. So coming back to the this women's order before this kind of introduction of hierarchies and civilization and ultimately the state. Another important aspect of that is the economy. Like I said, in that style of societies, that women are responsible and taking care of the nurturing and the feeding of not only children but of the whole society. They are responsible for taking care that everybody gets what they need. And this kind of need-driven economy says that's actually the real economy, like the basic needs, like food, shelter, and security, like the self-defense as another branch of that, but it's less like economical. It's more like to secure and guard, defend the economy. But this is like the real economy. This is what all people need. They need food and shelter. So obviously we have this everywhere where humans are. And then big jump to the to capitalism, which is not driven by the needs. Like it's not there. Like if we have more capitalism, we don't have automatically the end of hunger because everybody gets to the goods are shared and everybody has to eat or something, or everybody has housing. Obviously not the case. We don't have to look very far. Because it's profit driven. It's whatever is done, so-called economically, is not to meet these needs of people, but to create profit. And it doesn't really matter if the needs of people are met or not, as long as there is a profit. That's like the basic idea there. And now going back to I'm jumping a bit back and forth now. If we look at this original society before state and civilization, this is exactly the thing that was introduced there. So, for whatever reason, people men decided to break up this kind of society and of economy, and to create something else, like to build more or less useless stuff like pyramids, which have no real material purpose for the to feed people or to host people, because there's only one person who lives there, and it's the pharaoh who's buried there at the end. But also with these, first think of a small group of armed people who are maybe experienced in hunting or something. They are able to disrupt this economy and occupy it, and to steal it. Basically, uses the metaphor of the burglar, that actually a woman has the house, like being like economy comes from Greek oikos, the house, nomos like the measurement or the law or the determination or something. So she has this economy, this house, and this strong man comes in as a burglar and just takes it away from her and shuts her into the house. Like, and she gets limited in what she can do and what she cannot do, how she can move and how she cannot move. And he goes as far as to say actually like this whole settling business in a world where you can actually just go around and have enough to eat or anything, like to move to that is probably also socially driven and not. There's always this question, these theories, like why did humans start to actually settle down? Like nobody like really knows. There's a bunch of theories, but there's literature written about that. Like recently, since we know that there's something like ecological crisis, a lot of people say yes, probably there was some ecological crisis or so on. He doesn't really buy that. He says like probably has this kind of social reasons. Like why would anybody let themselves be confined into a house and into a certain place and limit themselves if not they are forced to? So he sees like patriarchy being definitely or most likely much older than a sedentary lifestyle, with all these things that have been also built like long before the pyramids. The pyramids are pretty recent, like 2000 before Christ or something. It's the first pyramids or something like that. And these big buildings in Kurdistan, Göbekli Temple, you may have heard. But I'm familiar here. So it's like very impressive things. They are like more like 9,000 BC, so like much older. And he's like, yeah. So I'm coming to this whole science stuff as well. So he says like, yeah, actually, we are blinded a little bit by what Western authors are writing, like saying, okay, oh, this is cool. Like they can make technology. They can build so great temples like 10,000 years ago. He says, yeah, but they're pretty useless. They're probably some male symbol to say, look, I can make you build this stuff. Like I can force people to build this. There's a very recently one has been found in Turkey, which is a bit odd. It's called a place called Karahantepe. It's like similar, only that it's not only like phallic stones, but they're like really phallus. It's like hundreds of them. Like a kind of temple, like literally made from stone penises, like pretty weird. So like coming from that, says yeah, this whole thing is actually like men telling the women or the women order like in this myth, this struggle between Enki and Yona, saying now I show you like that I'm now in power, so I have this stuff that is actually useless and has nothing to do with this previous order. So it's interpretation like everything. He calls his method an interpretation, basically of science of interpretation. And yes, the suggestion, as I was saying yesterday as well, it's like to really question literally everything, like all these things that we have been taught that we take for granted. Like in this example, it's an old building, great, how much technological capabilities these people have then. Yeah, this is one way to look at it, but it's probably a patriarchal, Western-centered view on things, and maybe it was like terrifying for the people, or what were they trying to prove by building something like that, and to whom and against whom, and then you often land at this like matriarchal societies maybe still existing at the time, maybe already conquered or subdued, whatever. So gives a different perspective to think about these things. The same goes to paradise. Was a little like a footnote for to yesterday, like the story how humans were created to actually serve the gods. This whole image of paradise and the opposite, like some kind of hell, which is not really well defined actually how the religion, like what hell actually is. So it turns out like then hell is actually the suffering life we're living, or the violence we're experiencing, or the troubles. And paradise is the life of these gods that are served by us, by the humans. But you have the hope to get there. So it's some place that you would like to be, or you get promised you can get to paradise by doing this or that. So this dichotomy between like paradise and hell is actually also something that you can only imagine or have when you have these hierarchies in society, like massive hierarchies, like massive discrepancies, where this comes from. So I want to go a bit more, because time's almost up, I've gotten lost in this mythology stuff. A bit more on the, like what is actually then suggesting. Like I said already, like all this Western thinking, all the scientific, one always has to say a lot of this is, of course, has to be understood as self-criticism. Like he's writing it like for everybody, obviously, but also it's very much addressed to the own like organization and the people he's been with for like 5 decades now in the struggle. It's a criticism of the former concepts, because the former idea was to say, okay, we are like scientific socialists, so we have like learned it from Marx and Engels and everything. So this is the socialist worldview is the most scientific worldview, has the right consciousness. Everybody else is a little bit wrong. So we have it all figured out, and we can teach the rest of the world. So this this is the direction. Also the Kurdish movement was coming from, and he's at least since the mid 80s, like 90s, has been questioning these kind of things. And as like the narrative that I'm giving it, like you see, it's very very different from that, from classic Marxist narrative. So the question is then, what kind of science can there be? Because it's still it's not like primitivist saying, okay, we should throw away all technology, like leave all science and just go back to Stone Age life or something like that. It's more like, okay, what is wrong and how can we correct it? Like what is wrong, like in the ways we are trying to get to know things, in the epistemologies that we are using, which others should we look at. And so this goes a bit in 2 directions. One is this criticism. David here today also. There's this.
David?
Oh, yeah,
In the back.
here. I see. Okay. No, it was. It's one book by. That was published in Turkey as like a book by Emanuel Wallerstein, recently deceased professor. He had chaired a commission, long story, but it's a book on the state of social sciences in the plural, social sciences, and like what the problems are and what to do. And it's a very, I recommend this book. I don't know what the English title is though.
Rethinking social science? Is it rethinking social science?
Yeah, unthinking social science.
Unthinking social science.
Is that the name of the thing? Because actually the actual title is the Gulbenkian report from this foundation where it comes from, but probably that's the book, Unthinking Social Sciences. So there, and Öcalan takes this up, is like a massive criticism of this this creating of separating first of all the social sciences, like the question interest them with each other, and none of them has the possibility to change anything alone. They can only doctor around in some small area. At the same time, it's a kind of like giving this connection of like starting with the Sumerian priests until the ideologues today. It's a kind of divide and conquer strategy by the rulers, because if nobody can do much and can change the system like profoundly in terms of the findings of their own scientific work, then they're less dangerous. And if you have like one big movement, let's say, that cooperates in all kinds of ways and it works together in the same direction, that is could pose a much bigger challenge to the ruling powers. So this is so in short, this is the description of the problem, that this science or the social sciences are divided into many sciences, while at the same time being tied too much or being too dependent on the power, like in terms of whether something is taught or not, or some school is shut down or not, or whether some institute is financed or not. So the suggestions that Öcalan makes to address this, and that the movement has taken up and is trying to address this on the one hand, to try to bring these sciences like together again to form one social science, which he, like in the way he describes it or calls for, is called the sociology of freedom, in lack of a better term. Like he's always saying for a lot of things, I call it like this, but hopefully somebody will come up with a better term in the future, so it's like maybe rename to something else. But this sociology of freedom, or this kind of, or in this whole cluster of different ways of investigating like society or different aspects of society, like the overarching sociology, like this general thing, that would then be like the queen of sciences. That's where this term comes from. Like in a similar manner as the philosophy in the medieval philosophy in the Middle Ages was like considered actually the queen of sciences and having everything else actually in it, like physics or something is an offshoot that was before part of philosophy. So to get to a point like that, of course, on a more different level. And the other thing is to make all this kind of research and researching and changing society like independent from power, like in terms of funding or controlling it, to make it independent, to be able to develop really independent thought, like he thinks in all kinds of ways. Our thought being colonized by power, like all these concepts that we're having, all this that we have internalized, including like patriarchy or certain ways of looking at the world, excluding other worldviews, declaring them whatever primitive or outdated or unscientific or whatever, to become independent from that and build it. Again, from scratch kind of, or not from scratch, but building on, of course, on other research. As a special area in this is the Jineolojî. It's often shortened, or it's said that this means like the science of women, but this is a bit too short, because it's actually not only like of women or by women. Again, like he's not like naturalizing or making a biological separation or anything. He's not saying only women can build this kind of society. It's more like them leading like the way and also teaching men or like educating men on the way. But to research especially these like different history stories of women through the ages, or the knowledge that women have collected that has been excluded or made invisible or buried, and to look at all these societal questions from a decidedly a woman's point of view. So the other part of like the name Jin. Okay, maybe I should explain this for those who don't know. Like the Kurdish word Jin, it's very close to Jin means woman, and it's very close to the word Jin with a longer e, which means life. So there you have like a sort of connection already in the language, but it's really about all these connections, like how all this like creation, this preserving, this defending, this nurturing, how this is building a connection with life, while a lot of what patriarchy brings is actually more about killing and death. So it's like taking away, it's stealing, it's occupying, it's organizing war, all these things. So to look at the world and all these scientific questions from this perspective, from the perspective of women and of life, which doesn't exclude the possibility that also men are doing this or learning this, or although it may be more difficult for us to reconnect to a lot of things. Maybe in this context I should shortly mention, actually, I don't know if it was already actually started late or how much later we start.
You have time. Yeah.
Okay. So another or two other concepts in this or topics is the war. I just mentioned it. Like the movement has a very broad definition of war. First of all, maybe I should mention the most like prominent thing that is mentioned again and again. Like for over 20 years now, the movement has been saying that a third world war has started. It's not like the Zapatistas who said in '94 that the First World War had started. So it's a bit of a different narrative, but really saying that this new world order, which is felt very much, or the attempt to create a new world order, which has been felt very much since the 90s in the Middle East, being in a perpetual state of war. I mean, there's been like one war or another, or several at the same time, like going on for decades now. And the movement interprets this as a being a center, not only because it's about the oil or something, but because of the several a lot of aspects like that makes the Middle East special and different. It's not only these resources that are vital for a lot of technologies. It's also the let's say in terms of how do you say, like idealistic or ideals, like the non-materialistic values. Like there's a lot of it's very heavily charged with religion. That's not only relevant for locally but globally. Like it has a big meaning. Like places there have a lot of meaning for people. Like stories connected with them, like religious tales and narratives have a big meaning. So that makes it a center unlike others in the world. Then the fact that really, I mean, in this context, the way I explained how the movement looks at civilization and the state, like really being the birthplace of all of this, and by saying like not only understanding things from their origin, but also changing them at that place of origin. There's this thing that like a plant can only grow on its own roots. Like if you want to have like a fresh thing, like you can cut down a tree, but then maybe still there's a plant coming from that, but it can only come from its own roots. It can't come like 5 kilometers away or something. So saying that that makes it important, and also the traditions there are so deep rooted, like be some state traditions or the like patriarchy as well, but also like even older societal formations like tribes. I haven't mentioned that much. I think I mentioned it in the text for the talk, but I haven't mentioned yet. Like tribes being a very fascinating kind of social structure, being much older than the state, and still kind of resisting, like still trying to be independent from the state or have make their own rules and their own laws. Like we've just had it, a question about what's happening right now in Rojava, like what decision one tribe makes there can influence a lot politically. Like it can make or break the alliance of the Syrian Democratic Forces. If a big tribe that has hundreds of thousands of people says, okay, I switch my loyalty and go with the transition government. So nobody in the news in the West talks about tribes, but if you live in the Middle East, tribes are an important reality. And it's one that the movement, in the beginning saw as something very backward, like has to be overcome, for socialism and for class and society. We have to do away all these old structures. But through the experience of the last couple of decades, it has a more nuanced view. Like, of course, there's like backward and very problematic aspects of it. But on the other hand, it's a very enduring, strong social structure that provides like security and sharing between, like a kind of solidarity between the members, and cannot simply be ignored, but can be maybe like reformed, or the good things about it can be like preserved and built upon, while at the same time criticizing and fighting against other aspects of the social structure. Like it has this kind of double character that also the state has from the beginning. I was gonna tell us another story from the Bible, just like very short. Maybe you're familiar with the story of Joseph being like some minister in some job in Egypt. Mm-hmm. And then there's the story about the 7 years when there's a lot of harvest, and then there's 7 years where it's drought and no harvest, and also what is happening there, and also has happened in Sumerian states in Mesopotamia, that the harvest is monopolized by the state, so they collect all the grains, so they can, in case of need, give it to the people, like organize this kind of stuff. So this has been, since the very beginning, a function of the early states. So it takes from you, and then becomes the monopolist, and it's like, so you are no longer in charge of whatever you harvest. It takes from, but it also describes itself as giving, and caring for you, and providing in case of need. So it's great security, and so you have this double character of security. Like on one hand, you have some kind of social security that doesn't let you starve to death. On the other side, it builds up armed forces to say, okay, I provide my version of security as well by enforcing this or that, or conquering this or that, securing our needs by taking them from somebody else. So the security narrative in the state has a double character since 5,000 years. And the same is with the tribes, kind of like it has to be very carefully analyzed and then looked into to see what should be preserved and what not. So the other what else was there on the Middle East? Yeah, so structures like these are very how do you say, like very very difficult to change. Like hundreds of years of capitalism and modernity haven't managed to dissolve the tribes. In some places they have, but in others it's very enduring. So there's this kind of in the English word for inertia. It's not really, like
Momentum? No.
Yeah, well, the capability to stop momentum. Just Okay, let's say inertia.
Resilience.
I was looking for something else.
Resilience.
Yeah, resilience. Also, not exactly. Whatever. You understand what I'm talking about.
It's one of them.
Don't have to. So this makes it very difficult for for the system, if we talk in these terms, like to spread into the Middle East. Like it has like Western capitalism, let's say, or capitalism in general, has conquered like the East, like Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, after the end of the Soviet Union, like very quickly, like some kind of like very radical capitalism with all kinds of mafia structures and oligarchs that became billionaires in like a handful of years by just stealing and taking away what supposedly belonged to the society, but was monopolized by the state, so then they monopolized it. So, but it has been much more difficult to really do away with all the structures, the state structures, the clan structures, and whatever in the Middle East. So it is much more inert against these things. So this is why this current this perpetual need to expand and to like conquer everything and impose the own way of like doing politics or way of life. It has resisted as a region, like in different ways. Some more progressive, some very backwards, but has resisted this kind of imposing. So this makes it a target in a way, and in general as a region, like a victim in this war, in this world war of the civilization. Basically, it's not between different civilizations, but it's on off civilization. And also another important aspect of how the movement talks about war is not that it's not limiting the understanding to the war between states, like one state attacks the other, like as if this is war, but looks at all these different structures, like also not only about like an armed group, a militia, tries to get into the city or something, but more like, for instance, a war on society, that also in all the societies that are seemingly peaceful, while we know that, by having, for instance, an army staying in another country, like the society itself, domestically can't be super peaceful, if it's fighting elsewhere, but also that there's actually a war being waged on these societies domestically, like trying to, through different ways, like economically, the classical meaning of economy, like economically keeping it independent, like always threatening with unemployment, starvation. If you don't do this, don't do that, then you won't have any money and you won't be able to do anything or survive even. Through media, like influencing the way people think, or what they think about, or what they do not think about, like by being kind of, how do you say, like narcoticized, so all this they regard as a war on society, which is going on basically everywhere. So this is not independent from these military wars where a lot of people get killed, which are also have been like super intense in the Middle East in the recent decades. Like we're talking about for the different communities there of not only one or two, but like a couple of genocides. Like the latest maybe being the one in Gaza and Palestine, but also in 2016 and 14 to 16 against the Kurdish population, which really the declared aim of Islamic State was to wipe them out. There have been still, it's out of the news, but there are still a huge number of the enslaved women that were then sold on markets in different countries are still missing. Like, it's an ongoing effort to free them and to buy them out and something, but a lot of them are still like disappeared. There's in the Caucasus, there's been like a whole region that was with an Armenian population has been wiped out. Therefore, been either killed or driven out of there. So all these things are happening like basically all the time. There's always a threat of this kind of genocide hanging over the societies. on the one hand. On the other side, there's all these things imposed to make it difficult or impossible to organize. And yet another concept, and maybe then slowly close with that may be interesting, is that of society side. There is it exists in sociology, that term. If you Google it, there's some people using this in a different way. But with society side, what it means is not only the physical extermination of a society or of a large part of the society, which would be the classical definition of genocide, which also is a concept that the movement uses a lot in a wider sense, or in a more, from own experience, like saying, for instance, for Kurdish people, like being denied the possibility to speak their own language or to form any political structures themselves in large parts of Kurdistan, is also a kind of genocide. Like it's not only to wipe out population, but also make it impossible to express an own will. And society side goes even deeper, saying like say in a Western society that is completely individualized, it goes towards making functioning as a society impossible. So to lower the capacity to organize anything, to act together for the own interest, to form some self-administration or some, to realize anything out of working and consuming. So basically making it impossible to function as a society. They call society side. Öcalan introduced that term, and I find it quite an important and interesting concept, which trying to think about what is actually happening, what actually or some more than the obvious problems that we're having. Think about in this kind of dimension. So yeah, I haven't talked so much now about this building blocks, but I think Jineolojî and social science, which don't have the logo here today, but the Academy of Social Science that I'm working with, and some of your faculty members, Cargo, and they are also in it, is trying to make some steps on the way to creating this unified social science and think a lot of things from a radically different perspective. And so is Jineolojî. Jineolojî already has a huge network in many countries, women that are researching local histories, local women's histories, plus all kinds of different things, whether it's traditional healing methods or like gender relations in different contexts, doing a lot of work there already. But on the other hand, I looked it up yesterday, I didn't have it like 100%. It's what I talked about, the people who are have a lot of knowledge but work inside of the established academic, let's say, structures that are tied to the power structures. Öcalan calls them, and I'm close here, calls them either intellectual capitalists, because they don't use knowledge for the good of society and the good of everybody, but think of how they can get some patents or otherwise turn their knowledge into money, into capital, or they have a lot of this useless, or not useless, but not unimplemented knowledge that doesn't really change society, and that he calls intellectual capitalists or intellectual load donkeys. So because they carry all this knowledge on their back, but are led around by a leash by others without being really able to make their own way. I'll stop here and hope you're again with us for the third evening. Thank you very much.